That night, it was pouring rain, as if trying to wash the world clean. I live in an old house in the suburbs, surrounded by trees, usually very quiet. I was alone at home that night. My boyfriend was away on a business trip. To be honest, I was kind of enjoying the solitude, able to watch movies and eat snacks as I pleased, with no one to bother me. I had locked all the doors and windows, as was my habit. I was sitting on the sofa, an old movie playing on TV, the rain pattering against the windows, occasionally punctuated by a dull rumble of thunder. Around 11 o'clock, I started to feel something wasn't right. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the tree branches, but I soon realized it wasn't. I heard a faint rustling sound outside the window, like someone moving through the bushes. I turned off the TV and pricked up my ears, listening carefully. The rain was still heavy, but that subtle rustling managed to cut through the downpour, making my heart clench. I walked to the window, carefully lifted a corner of the curtain and peered out. It was pitch black outside, with only a few motion sensor lights in the yard flickering dimly in the rain. I didn't see anything, so I told myself it was probably just a small animal. But just as I was about to turn away, I saw something flash past behind an old oak tree at the edge of the yard. It wasn't the movement of branches, it was something darker, like a human shadow. My heart started to race, and a cold sensation spread from my feet upwards. Terrified, I quickly dropped the curtain and went back to the sofa, trying to calm myself down. I told myself I was just alone and overthinking things. However, after only a few minutes, I heard a faint scratching sound, like someone dragging a fingernail or a tool across the window glass. The sound was very light, muffled by the rain, but I heard it clearly. The sound was coming from another window in the living room. I sprang to my feet, my mind a blank. I carefully walked to that window and looked out from the side. In the dim light, I saw a dark figure standing outside the window, pressed against the glass. Their face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel them staring at me. They didn't move, just stood there silently. My breathing hitched. Panic seized me, and I turned and ran into the kitchen, grabbing the longest kitchen knife I could find and clutching it tightly. My hands were shaking, but the adrenaline kept me somewhat alert. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call the police. Just then, I heard a dull thud from the living room, like someone had slammed into the door. Then came several heavier impacts, each accompanied by the sound of wood cracking. My mind cleared instantly. He was getting in. Without thinking, I turned and ran towards the hallway leading to the bedroom. I heard the sound of breaking glass from the living room, followed by heavy footsteps, coming closer and closer. I quickly rushed into the bedroom, locked the door, and then used everything I could find, chairs, a small table, to barricade the door. I huddled under the bed, curled into a ball, my phone pressed tightly against my ear. I had already dialed 911, but my voice was shaking so much I could barely speak. The footsteps outside were at the bedroom door now, and then I heard the doorknob being twisted. The door groaned under the impact, and the chair I'd used to block it squeaked under the pressure. I heard heavy breathing outside, and then a low, guttural curse. The voice was cold and raspy, like something crawled out of hell. I knew he was right outside the door, only a few feet away from me. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying. Just when I thought it was over for me, I heard the wail of police sirens in the distance, getting closer. The banging on the door stopped, and I heard him let out an angry growl, then the sound of hurried footsteps running away. A few minutes later, the police broke down the door and found me cowering under the bed, still clutching the knife. The police quickly secured the scene. They found a pried-open window in the backyard, with shattered glass everywhere. They told me the person had escaped, but they had found some things. On the living room windowsill, they discovered a small infrared thermal imager, clearly used to detect if anyone was inside. What truly chilled me to the bone was that the police also found small pinhole cameras, disguised with black electrical tape, on several trees around my house. They were pointed at my bedroom window, my living room window, and even my front door, which I used every day. "He's probably been watching you for a long time," one officer told me. "It looks like he knew your boyfriend was away and that you were alone tonight." I instantly felt hollowed out, as if all the air had been sucked out of me. The rain, the thunder, the shadow outside the window that night, they weren't isolated incidents, but a meticulously planned hunt. He wasn't acting on a whim, he had premeditated this. Since then, I haven't been able to feel safe alone at home. Every time I hear the rain, I feel a bone-deep chill. The shadow of being watched for so long never leaves me. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but whenever I turn off the lights at night, I always feel those eyes, still silently staring from some dark corner. Last year, my company sent me on a 2-week business trip to an unfamiliar city. To save on hotel costs, I rented what looked like a decent apartment on Airbnb. The photos showed a bright, spacious room with tasteful decor, and most importantly, it was significantly cheaper than hotels in the same area. At the time, I thought I'd gotten lucky, but it turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare. I arrived on a Saturday, and the landlord had sent me the access code in advance. Following the navigation, I found the old apartment building. The security gate was flimsy, the hallway dimly lit, and it reeked of an indescribable mildew, a far cry from the glossy photos. But I didn't think much of it. I figured I'd only be there for 2 weeks and could tough it out. The apartment was on the 5th floor. As soon as I stepped inside, a cold draft hit me, making me shiver. The room did look like the photos, new furniture and all, but something felt off, right? A lack of warmth. The entire place was eerily quiet, as if all life had been drained from it. I put down my luggage, quickly tidied up, and prepared to head out for some essentials. Just as I was about to close the door, I noticed a small wooden plaque hanging on the wall behind it. The plaque was painted black, with a line of text written in white paint, the handwriting a bit messy like a child's. "Please do not feed." I paused, puzzled. Feed? Feed what? This wasn't a zoo. I instinctively scanned the room, but saw no signs of any pets. Probably a prank left by a previous tenant, I thought, shaking my head and dismissing it. That night, exhausted from my journey, I collapsed into bed. In the middle of the night, I was woken by a faint click-clack sound. It was subtle, like someone chewing something or fingernails scraping wood. I opened my eyes. The room was pitch black. The sound seemed to come from the living room. I held my breath, listening closely, but the sound vanished. Maybe I'd imagined it, or it was a neighbor upstairs, I thought, rolling over to try and sleep again. Over the next few days, this strange sound became more frequent. Each time, after I'd fallen asleep, that faint click-clack would start in the living room, lasting a few seconds before abruptly stopping. I became increasingly paranoid, meticulously checking that all doors and windows were locked before bed each night. What unsettled me even more was that small details in the room began to change. I usually kept my toiletries on the right side of the sink, but several times I found my toothbrush moved to the left. My laptop, which I distinctly remembered closing before leaving, was open when I returned, displaying a blank desktop. Most terrifying of all, the novel I'd left half-read on my nightstand was open to a completely different page the next morning, and there was a dried, brownish stain the size of a fingernail on the page, looking like blood. I began to suspect the landlord or cleaning staff were entering the apartment when I was out. But why would they move my things? And that stain? I messaged the landlord, asking if anyone had been in or out of the apartment. The landlord replied quickly, very politely, saying no, and assuring me that Airbnb had strict policies against entering a tenant's room without permission. At that moment, a chill ran from my feet straight to my head. If not the landlord, then who could it be? I decided to install a camera. I bought a small security camera at a convenience store downstairs and hid it behind a potted plant in the living room, pointing towards the living room and bedroom entrance. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, that maybe it was all just my imagination. That night, I lay in bed, my phone connected to the camera, the screen showing the pitch-black living room. At first, nothing happened. I was so sleepy my eyelids kept drooping, almost falling asleep. Just as I was drifting off, a blurry figure suddenly appeared on the screen. It was small and indistinct, like a little girl in a nightgown, moving slowly across the living room. She had no clear outline, like a wavering shadow, but she was definitely human-shaped. She seemed to linger in the living room for a bit, then slowly, she walked towards my bedroom door. My heart pounded, so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. My phone was gripped tightly in my sweaty hand. I stared intently at the screen. The blurry figure of the little girl stopped at my bedroom door, and then she tilted her head, as if looking through the screen at me. Then slowly, step by step, she walked into my bedroom. I was terrified, wanting to scream, but unable to make a sound. I watched the figure on the screen finally stop by my nightstand. I could almost feel that something was there, just a few feet from me. Then the familiar click-clack sound started, clearer than ever, right by my ear, accompanied by that unsettling chewing sound. Instinctively, I yanked back the covers and switched on my bedside lamp. The room instantly lit up, and the blurry figure of the little girl on the camera screen vanished. The living room was empty. On my nightstand, my novel lay peacefully undisturbed. But I clearly saw that next to the original brown stain, there was a new one, larger, wetter, and darker than before. I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, I grabbed my luggage and fled the apartment. Before checking out, I made a point of visiting the apartment building's management office. The old man at the desk was reading a newspaper. I made up an excuse and asked if he knew of anything strange that had ever happened in the building. The old man put down his newspaper, looked at me, and slowly said, "Little girl, you're staying in that room on the 5th floor, aren't you?" I nodded. He sighed and said, "That room, a mother and daughter used to live there. The mother had some mental issues, always saying there were things in the house that wanted to eat her food. Her daughter would often scratch the walls in the room, saying she was preparing food for them." My hair stood on end. I pressed him. "What happened to them?" The old man shook his head. "They moved out later, but when they left, under her daughter's bed, they found a pile of fingernails." "Fingernails?" I forced myself to ask, fighting down the nausea. "Yes, all kinds of fingernails and some bone fragments, all dried up," the old man said casually. "They had a plaque hanging in the room, saying it was a rule for them not to feed them too much." My mind went blank with a sudden ringing sound. I remembered the "please do not feed" plaque behind the door, the click-clack sound every night, the sudden stain on my novel, the blurry figure of the little girl lingering in the room on the camera. Everything clicked into place. It wasn't a prank, nor had I misheard, nor was it my imagination. There really was something in that room, and they had been there all along, with that little girl, enjoying their food. I never went back to that apartment. I didn't even bother with the deposit. I just left the city. When I got home, I threw away the clothes I'd worn on the trip, along with everything in my suitcase. To this day, I can't forget that night, the little girl's figure walking into the bedroom on the camera, and that clear click-clack sound by my ear. Whenever I'm alone, I instinctively hold my breath, listening carefully, terrified of hearing that familiar chewing sound again. I always feel like somewhere where I can't see, something is in the darkness, smiling at me with greedy eyes. This all went down a few years ago, back in the summer of 2022. I just graduated college and was still figuring things out, basically just chilling at my parents' place. It was a pretty typical suburban summer, scorching hot during the day, but the nights were usually cool. My folks were visiting relatives in Florida, so I had the house all to myself. I actually really liked being alone. It was peaceful. I was usually a night owl back then, binging shows, playing video games, doing my own thing without anyone bothering me. One night, it must have been around 2 a.m., I was curled up on the couch watching Netflix, and the house was dead silent. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound from the kitchen, like something lightly tapping the counter. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe the wind had blown a window open, or a small animal had gotten in. Our house was old, and we'd occasionally get squirrels. So, I brushed it off and went back to my show. About 5 minutes later, there was another sound, clearer this time, like something made of glass being moved. My stomach dropped. All the windows were shut, and squirrels don't really mess with glass cups. I turned off the TV, and the house instantly plunged into silence, save for the hum of the fridge. I just sat there, ears strained, barely breathing. After a few seconds, I heard something even more unsettling. The kitchen cabinet door opened, then softly closed again. It was the kind of sound someone would make if they were carefully rummaging through things, trying not to make a racket. My scalp prickled, and my heart started hammering. My parents weren't home, so there was no one else who could be in the house. My first thought was a burglar, but burglars usually don't move so quietly, do they? They'd pry open a lock or smash a window, not glide around like a ghost. I grabbed my phone, carefully unlocked it, the screen light glaring in the dark. I crept off the couch, hunching over, slowly inching towards the kitchen. The living room was pitch black, with only a faint glow from the streetlights outside filtering through the thin curtains. Each step I took, the slight creak of the floorboards ratcheted up my tension. When I reached the living room kitchen threshold, I stopped. I could feel a blast of cold air coming from the kitchen, not like the AC was on. I held my breath, trying to listen for any movement. Then I heard it perfectly clear, someone inhaling, then slowly exhaling, right there in the kitchen, just a few feet away from me. It wasn't my own breath, and it wasn't the wind. It was a human breathing. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I realized this wasn't just a burglar, this was more like an intruder. He or she had probably been in my house for a while. I quietly retreated back into the living room, my mind a jumbled mess. I picked up my phone, trying to call the police, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even dial. My eyes darted to the coffee table, where an old, heavy magazine lay. I gripped it, knowing it was practically useless, but it gave me a sliver of false comfort. I started backing away, wanting to find a place to hide, or just bolt out the front door. As I was backing up, the kitchen suddenly lit up, a cell phone screen. The light was dim, but starkly clear in the darkness, illuminating the side of a person's face. The figure had their back to me, hunched over, seemingly looking through our fridge. I saw a bit of their profile, a high nose, a somewhat pointed chin, distorted slightly by the faint glow of the phone screen. They were utterly still, like a statue. My breath hitched. I dared not make a sound. Then slowly they turned their head. I saw it clearly. Their eyes glinted in the darkness, staring directly at me. In that moment, my blood froze. I saw their mouths slowly stretch into a grotesque smile. I let out a scream, spun around, and dashed for the front door. My hands fumbled with the lock, shaking so much I couldn't open it. I heard quick footsteps behind me. They were coming. I could feel them right behind me, their breathing getting closer. I twisted the doorknob with all my might, and finally the door opened. I stumbled out, practically rolling, not even bothering with shoes, my bare feet hitting the cold asphalt. I ran as fast as I could, through my yard, towards my neighbor's house. I glanced back, my front door was wide open, but the figure wasn't chasing me. They were just standing in the doorway, utterly still, watching me. The dim streetlights outlined their dark silhouette, making them look like a lifeless cutout. I could almost feel their eyes, even from that distance, still fixated on me. I reached my neighbor's door and frantically pounded on it, yelling for help. My neighbors quickly woke up and, after hearing my frantic story, immediately called the police. The police arrived swiftly and searched my house, but found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, not even any evidence of an intrusion. The fridge door was open, and things had been rummaged through, but nothing was missing. It was as if the person had simply looked around and then vanished. The officers said it was strange, maybe someone had just come to the wrong house, or it was a prank. But I knew better. I knew those eyes I saw, that unsettling smile, they belonged to no one who simply came to the wrong house. Since that night, I've never stayed alone in that house again. Every time I'm by myself at night, I make sure all the doors and windows are triple locked, and I leave all the lights on. I just have this feeling that night, that person, they're still out there somewhere watching me. I don't know who they were, why they did what they did, or what they wanted from me. The only thing I know for sure is that summer, I completely lost my sense of safety in my own home. That feeling, it's more terrifying than any ghost, because you know it's a real person, and you never know when they might come back.